Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned for Roger's Random Book Show. It's Roger's Random Book Show once again, a show where Roger and we just wandered around the manor and picked up some books at random, and now we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about them, Roger. Roger will do most of the talking as usual, but I'll try to get a word in here or there. So, these are just some random books, so let's talk about these random books. We have some classics. We have some classics here to talk about. Like Jules Verne. Let's talk about Jules Verne, an author that, he's been badly treated in English. At least he was when he first showed up in English translations. A lot of the early English translations of Jules Verne's books, they weren't so great. They tended to make weird changes. They changed character names all the time. They cut stuff out. They were kind of mangled in some of their original English translations. So a lot of the original translations of Jules Verne are not looked upon with great favor by scholars of these works. And that includes the earlier translations for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Now, this here is the annotated Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, edited by Walter James Miller. And as it says on the back, I'll just read a bit of the back here, this long-needed edition of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea finally does justice both to this remarkable work and to its extraordinary author. For the first time, we have access to a full English translation of the text instead of the badly cut, poorly translated, and bewilderingly expurgated earlier English editions. And it includes lots of illustrations, and it is annotated, as the title says, and it's magnificent. It's beautiful, and it has, a lot of these original illustrations included in this volume. When was this published? This was published by New American Library in 1976. I don't know if there are any annotated versions of this quality available now. Perhaps somebody knows and can tell me. There are some good translations out now of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But this was kind of an early attempt to fix the problem. And it does a very good job, I believe. And like I said, not only is it full of helpful annotations, it has all these original illustrations from the book, from the original publishing of the book. And they're magnificent. And there's so many notes in here because there are a lot of... Jules Verne likes to give a lot of scientific explanations for things. One thing you'll notice if you read an uncut translation of this book is that there's a lot about fish in here. It added to the realism for Jules Verne, and it was just interesting to him to have all of this scientific information in here. Jules Verne was interested in science, and he loved to put all of that stuff in his books, and he puts a lot in here. But this is also a magnificent book and one of my favorite adventure novels. We have a map over here. So this book has all kinds of stuff in it. And, it's an excellent annotated edition. And I highly recommend it. If you ever find it out in the wild, pick it up. This is a good book to have. I don't know how often this was reprinted. This is the only edition I think that I've ever seen. I found this in San Francisco a few years ago and snatched it right up and was pretty happy to get it. And it's fantastic. I'm going to pick up another Jules Verne book, which kind of illustrates my point about some of the earlier translations. This is The Mysterious Island, which is a kind of sequel. It's a kind of sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This was an edition from the Heritage Press. So, if you have a Heritage Press book, you have to have your little copy of the Sandglass. You have to have that along with the original case. You need those things if you have a Heritage Press book. I love these old Heritage Press books, and this one is really, really nice. It's a lovely edition of Mysterious Island by Jules Verne, and it has some beautiful illustrations in it. However, this is a much maligned translation of Jules Verne. A lot of experts on Jules Verne hate this translation because it did cut portions of the text and it did change the names of the characters to make them sound more American. Got to make them sound more American because it is a story with Americans in it. And, you know, it's still beautiful though. And who does the illustrations for this volume? Has the original English translation by W.H.G. Kingston with an introduction by Ray Bradbury and illustrations by Edward A. Wilson. So it's beautiful, and here is a fantastic illustration of all the renamed characters that are in this book. This is the first translation I ever read of Mysterious Island. And against all logic, I really like it. I have an affection for it, probably because it was the original translation that I read, and I loved it when I read it. So I understand that there are much, much better versions of Mysterious Island out there than this one, but I still kind of love this. I love this very book, and it must be nostalgia. It must be because this was the version that I read. Not this copy, but it was this translation, which I checked out from the San Leandro Library, I believe, when I was probably 12 or something like that. I was young, and I just found this fascinating. I found it all the stuff in this book about how our American survivors were just so intelligent and thrifty and just knew how to do all kinds of things to make their lives better on this mysterious island. It was interesting to me, and I loved the story, and I loved the surprise. There was a surprise at the end because I had read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea first, and in an original translation, which I don't like as much, but this one I really like. Like I said, it's against all logic. But I do like this particular translation of this particular book. But like I said, there are better ones out there for sure. So that's Jules Verne. But now let's take a look at Arthur Conan Doyle, who, as we know, is the creator of Sherlock Holmes. And now he is known almost exclusively for his Sherlock Holmes stories, though of course he wrote a lot of other stories. He wrote a ton, Arthur Conan Doyle, including supernatural tales. And this is a volume from Dover. This is the best supernatural tales of Arthur Conan Doyle. And it's a lovely book. It's got a suitably creepy cover. This is selected and introduced by E.F. Blyler. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think this might still be in print from Dover. I'm not certain, though. It's got this lovely photograph of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle hard at work. And he did write supernatural stories. He wrote some good ones. And this one has a lot of cool stuff. Lot number 249 is probably his best known supernatural story, although there's The Ring of Thoth, and Selecting a Ghost, The American's Tale, The Brown Hand. There are a lot of really good stories in this book, and it's a very nice Dover edition. This is from back when Dover made paperbacks, which would hold up forever. These old Dovers are really well made, and so this is an old one. I don't know exactly when this was printed. This could be from 1979. This could be the original printing from 1979. I don't know, but it's old and still holds up and is really nice. And these stories are plenty creepy. But there is a newer book that has almost all these stories. There are a couple of them that it doesn't have, that I do want to recommend because it's a really good book, and that's this one. This is Gothic Tales by Arthur Conan Doyle. For some reason, it doesn't have all the stories that were in the Supernatural volumes. There are a couple that it's missing, but only a couple. It has this wonderful, creepy cover with this creepy person peeking through the crack in the door there. And this is wonderful. It's has a lot more stories than the other volume does. And it's just an excellent, excellent Oxford volume. It has a ton of stories. It's about 500 pages long. Again, it has the stories I mentioned and a whole bunch of others. And so if you're interested in Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and you want to check out something a little different, particularly his creepy stories, I recommend this. This is a newer book. It's still in print. You can get it easily wherever you get your new books. You should be able to get this one from Oxford's World's Classics. Oxford, they've done some good books as far as their classics are concerned. I don't think, in fact, I'm almost certain that Penguin does not have a volume comparable to this, and they should. These are excellent stories. I tend to think more of Arthur Conan Doyle's stories should be in print, in physical books. You can get everything, of course, that he wrote ever as ebooks. But if you want a physical copy, they could be hard to find, a lot of his non-Sherlock Holmes stuff. But this one is readily available, and it's excellent. So there you go. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Creepy stuff. So there's that. What else do I have to show you? It's still early. I've got plenty of time. Let's talk about movies, Roger. We haven't talked about movies for a while. And I have a book about movies that I think is pretty cool. And it's about these movies. These are the Universal Classic Monster movies. I have all these on old school DVD. These are DVDs. The Mummy, The Wolfman, Frankenstein, Dracula. Even got Phantom of the Opera over here. Although inexplicably, I don't think this has the silent version, which is strange. Why wouldn't it? But it doesn't. But these are some great movies, and I love these. And these are my favorite monster movies ever, and I used to watch them over and over as a kid. And so when I found this, I picked it right up. This is Universal Horrors, the studio's classic films, 1931 to 1946. And this is a book by Tom Weaver, Michael Brunis, and John Brunis. This is the second edition of this book. This edition, I think, came out in 2000 something or other. 2007, it looks like. Although I don't know if this particular one that I have is from 2007. It might be a later printing. I have no idea. I can't exactly remember where I picked this up. I can't exactly remember where it was, but it had to be probably Pegasus Books or someplace like that. But I was awful glad to get it. So this is the studio's classics films, 1931 to 1946. It has a ton in here about all the Universal horror monster movies, like Son of Frankenstein. And it has a ton of coverage about all of these films. We have Dracula's Daughter there. Dracula's Daughter, which was a pretty good movie. It wasn't the best movie, but it was a pretty good movie. And we also have stuff on a lot of the films that, for example, are not in this set at all. Like this, we don't have any Rondo Hatton movies in that set, but he did make some Universal horror movies, and they are all in here. There's the Son of Dracula, Lon Chaney Jr. looking like a very living Dracula. He doesn't particularly look undead, but I think his performance in that movie was better than people give him credit for. But it also has a bunch of other weird stuff, like the Mad Doctor of Market Street. The Mad Doctor of Market Street with Lionel Atwill. Gotta love Lionel. Lionel Atwill. Cool guy. Controversial life. And all kinds of stuff. We've got The Invisible Woman. So this book covers like all of the Universal monster movies and horror movies. And it even has the Sherlock Holmes movies in here, which kind of surprised me when I found those. It's got the Sherlock Holmes films in there. I guess, you know, if you're even a touch mysterious, you get to be in this book. Here we've got something from Black Friday. So, you know, if you're interested in these films, this has a bunch of information about them and talks all about these movies. So this book is pretty cool if you're interested in all that old stuff. And believe it or not, I'm interested in that old stuff. Roger's pissed because I didn't mention the Mummy movies. The Mummy movies are in here. They're in there, Roger. What else do I got sitting around? Well, I can't do one of these shows without throwing some Robert E. Howard in here. I figure I got to throw some Robert E. Howard in every one of these shows from now on. And this is The Complete Action Stories by Robert E. Howard. This is a book that was published by Wildside Press a few years ago. When was this published? By Wildside Press. 2001. So it was more than a few years ago. It was over 20 years ago. It doesn't seem that long since I got this book. This is a nice book. So this has the complete action stories, the stories that were published in Action Stories. And it starts off with some boxing stories, but then we get to the good stuff. Not that the boxing stories weren't good, but then we get to Breckenridge Elkins. And this has, I don't believe it has all of the Breckenridge Elkins stories, but it has a lot of them. I think it's got like 20 stories in here. It has 18, I think it said. And it has all the original illustrations. And the cool thing about this is that this volume has the Breckenridge Elkins stories about the humorous Western stories featuring Breckenridge Elkins. They're kind of tall tales that really display Robert E. Howard's sense of humor. And this volume has those stories as they were originally published in this magazine. They were all, the first few stories, the first 8 or 9 of them, were turned into kind of a fix-up novel, and they were changed a bit. But this volume has them in their original form. So this book is pretty cool if you can find it. If you can find it. And all of these stories are going to be reprinted soon from the Robert E. Howard Foundation Press in, you know, a few different volumes. But this is kind of cool to have. I like this one, The Complete Action Stories by Robert E. Howard. It's awesome. And it came out a long time ago, Roger. Geez, I'm old. So there's that. Do I have anything else to talk about? Hey, let's talk about something that's not completely old. Let's just talk a little bit about this. It's the Southern Reach trilogy. This is different. I told you this show is about random books. It's kind of random. And this is an omnibus volume of Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy. So in this volume, all about Area X, we've got Annihilation, which is probably it's the first volume in the series, and it's the most well-known. We've got Authority, and we've got Acceptance. So this is the trilogy by Vandermeer. And it's really, really, really weird. It feels like it very often has a kind of David Lynch-like feel when you're reading it. It's that strange. And it kind of pushes the boundaries of how far you can go writing a weird book, a creepy, weird book before you just get too strange, you know? And this might push it to the too strange. By the last book, this thing is just like, it gets pretty weird. I liked this trilogy. Not everybody does. Some people just absolutely hate these books. And I understand that. I understand not liking these books. But I like them. I like all 3 of them, the Southern Reach books. Annihilation is particularly good, I think, as just a bizarre, weird, creepy story. Very much influenced by H.P. Lovecraft and The Color Out of Space. But then this trilogy goes off in its own very odd direction. And so it's definitely a book that's not for everyone, to put it mildly, but it is really interesting. It's an interesting read, and I like it. It has been a while since I've read this. I think I read this in 2014. God, that was a while ago now too, Roger. My goodness, when was this volume published? Okay, this is published in 2014. So yeah, that's when I read this book. And I read the whole trilogy as, one volume. Although for some reason I think I have the paperbacks lying around here as well. But like I said, this is a nice book. A beautiful omnibus edition of the trilogy, which kind of does tell one story in a way, although each part is radically different. And, you read the first book in the trilogy and you get to the next one and you're like, what the hell? It's a very different and seems to be going in a very different direction, but it all ends up in complete weirdness. So there you go. Area X, the Southern Reach trilogy. I do recommend this book, although, like I said, a lot of people hate it, and I kind of understand that as much as I like it. So there's that. That probably should be everything because I've gone on. Oh, but I have to talk about I have to talk about comic books. So I did bring a comic book over here, and the comic book I brought out is one of, I do Epic Comic Book Wednesdays with Steve Donahue, and this is one of his favorite comic books of all time. This is Deathlok the Demolisher. And this is the complete collection of Deathlok, although it doesn't really have all of Deathlok. This is Deathlok, created by Rich Buckler, and the stories were written originally by Doug Mensch, although they started to be written by other people as well. And it's a really kind of out there science fiction series about this killer Deathlok, and it's something. I really need to read this again because it's been years and years since I've read Deathlok. If you want me to talk about this on Epic Comic Book Wednesday, let me know. Just let me know, and I will. Deathlok has never been one of Marvel's most popular characters. He's never been in the movies and never will. Although a version of Deathlok did appear in that television show, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which Marvel pretends didn't exist, even though it ended up being a pretty good show by the second season. Deathlok was in that, a version of Deathlok, a radically different version of Deathlok. But these original stories are interesting. And it has, if you're a Rich Buckler fan, this has probably a lot of his best work in this series of very bizarre stories about this cyborg killer, Deathlok. So yeah, let me know if you want me to do an Epic Comic Book Wednesday on this, and I will. Steve will love it. He can't wait to talk about Deathlok. Okay, guys, that's all I have for you for today. I will catch you next time.